The door handle felt colder than it should have. Maybe it was my imagination. Maybe it was the weight of the envelope in my purse, thick with documents that didn't yet feel real. Maybe it was the memory of my brother's voice, warm, teasing, annoyingly protective, echoing in my head as if he were walking up the stairs behind me instead of resting beneath a polished slab of stone. But mostly, it was the thought that after today, nothing in my house would ever be quite the same again. I took a breath, squared my shoulders, and walked in. The living room was spotless, more spotless than usual, which meant my daughter-in-law Sana had done one of her reset days. Cushions aligned, candles lit, the faint smell of lemon polish and too sweet air freshener lingering in the air. My son Amir sat on the sofa with his phone resting on his knee, pretending not to be waiting for me. He stood up too fast when he saw me. "Ami, you're back, how did it go?" His voice was carefully neutral, but his eyes flickered for a fraction of a second toward my purse. He wasn't the only one watching. Sana emerged from the kitchen with a tray already prepared. Tea, biscuits, the good cups that only came out for guests or good news. I had barely taken off my shoes. For a moment, we just looked at each other, the widow mother still learning to be alone, the son too eager for comfort he thought might come in the form of numbers on paper, the daughter-in-law whose politeness had always felt like a lace curtain. Pretty, but never meant to keep out the cold. "How was the notary?" Sana asked with a warm smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I sat down because my knees suddenly didn't feel trustworthy. It was long, a lot of documents. "Of course," she said, pouring tea, "we understand." She didn't. Neither of them did. And for a few dragging minutes, I wondered whether I would tell them everything at once, or whether I would first let the room breathe a little longer in ignorance, in the quiet simplicity before money and property and expectation turned oxygen into smoke. But life rarely respects our desire to delay. So I reached into my purse and placed the envelope on the table. Their eyes followed it like it was a living creature. "My brother," I began, "left behind some property. He left it to me." Silence fell into the room like a stone. Then slowly, like a curtain lifting, excitement rose into their faces. "How much?" Amir asked, trying and failing to soften the question. "3 apartments," I said simply. And just like that, the air changed. Not loudly, not rudely, just sharply. Sana inhaled, then clasped her hands together. "Mashallah," she said too quickly. "What a blessing." Her mind was already racing. I could see it in the stiffness of her shoulders, in the way she pressed her lips together as if to keep thoughts from spilling out. Amir sat back, stunned. 3, as in 3 separate ones. I nodded. He looked at me with a strange mixture of disbelief and relief, like someone being told the exam was actually easier than expected. "Ami, this changes everything for you," he said gently. "For me." The way he said it told me he didn't mean you. He meant us. My brother Salim had always said I was too soft. "You give away your last slice of bread," he used to tell me, "then you sit there hungry and insist you're full." We were close in that way only siblings who survived hardship together can be. Widowed young, I had raised my son with my own hands, my own exhaustion, my own quiet fears. Salim helped where he could, fixing things around the house, paying school fees when I fell short, defending me when relatives whispered that a woman without a husband must be desperate for attention. But he never told me about the apartments. Not once. So when the lawyer, stern, bespectacled, all logic and ink, slid the papers toward me and said, "He left them all to you," I felt both love and anger. Why me? Why only me? He must have known what it would do. Or perhaps he had trusted me. Perhaps that was worse. For the first few days after the notary meeting, the apartment documents lay untouched in my cupboard. I bought nothing new. I didn't even replace the kettle that wheezed like a dying bird every time it boiled. It felt sacred, that space of uncertainty, before money converted into expectation, before places with walls and doors turned into conversations about entitlement. But my son couldn't hold his curiosity forever. "Ami," he said one evening, "have you thought about what you'll do?" "With what?" He looked at me meaningfully. "The apartments." "I've thought about many things," I replied. He waited. I didn't elaborate. Another day passed, then another. Sana began to bring up future planning at dinner in the same tone one uses for the weather. She asked about maintenance costs, rental income, market trends. She sent me property listings just to compare. She meant well and yet not entirely. One evening, I overheard them in the hallway. "She doesn't need 3, Sana whispered. "She doesn't need to worry," Amir corrected. "That's not what you know we've been planning to move out of this rental. And with the baby coming next year." Silence. "She'll give us 1, Amir said, a note of certainty in his voice that struck my heart like glass. "Not ask. Not hope. Expect." I did not sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the living room with the lights off, the city outside buzzing like a restless insect. I stared at the framed photos on the wall, my wedding day, my son's graduation, the only decent picture of my brother and me as adults. We were laughing in it. I wondered what we had been laughing about. Probably something silly. Probably something that made sense only to us. "You knew," I murmured to the picture. "You knew they would look at me differently." In the dark, the envelope on the table seemed to glow. 3 apartments. 3 choices. 3 mirrors. The next morning, I made breakfast like nothing had changed. But everything had. Amir said finally, unable to contain himself anymore. "We've been thinking." I raised my hand gently. "So have I." He swallowed. "Right, well, what did you decide?" I looked at both of them. Then I told the truth. "I decided I will not give any apartment to anyone. I will keep them under my name." The silence that followed was not like the first one. The first had been stunned. This one was sharp. Sana blinked. "Of course, Auntie, it's yours, obviously." But her tone betrayed her. And my son, my sweet boy, my only child, looked at me as if I had just tightened a door lock between us. "Amis, we're your family." "I know. And you know our situation. Rent is high, we've been planning for." "I know. And still you want to just keep them all." His voice cracked slightly. It hurt. But I forced myself to remain steady. "Yes." "Why?" The word came out raw. I took a deep breath, because they are not for now, they are for later, for emergencies, for safety. For when the world is not kind, I have lived long enough to know that fortune can sour in a day. Sana folded her arms. "But we're not strangers, you talk like we'd throw you out in the street." "I don't think you would," I said quietly. "But life has a way of testing love, and I have a way of giving until there's nothing left. This time, I must learn to keep something for myself." Their disappointment filled the room like fog. I pretended not to notice. But I noticed everything. The change was subtle at first. Fewer shared coffees. More closed doors. More whispers that stopped when I entered the room. Sana remained polite, but the lace curtain had stiffened into glass. Amir tried to hide his confusion, his hurt, but he wasn't good at lying, not to me. He worked longer hours, spoke less, laughed rarely. And I began to doubt. Had I been selfish? Had grief made me hard? Was I punishing them for expectations they hadn't even fully voiced? One night I cried into my pillow, missing my brother with an ache so deep I could taste it. "Why did you do this?" I whispered into the dark. "Why give me something that makes the people I love look at me like a bank vault?" The dark did not answer. But time did. Slowly, cruelly, truthfully. 3 months later I fell. It was stupid, really. One loose tile, one distracted step, one sharp pain shooting up my leg like lightning. And suddenly the world was reduced to hospital ceilings and antiseptic smells. The fracture was clean, the doctor said, but the healing would be slow. Very slow. And that was when the true test began. For the first week, Sana was attentive. She brought soup, adjusted pillows, reminded me to take my medication. Amir drove me to checkups and massaged my swollen foot at night. But care is heavy. And goodwill can erode. Bills piled up. Schedules tightened. Patience thinned. "I have a meeting," Amir would say, even when he didn't need to leave yet. "I'll heat the food later," Sana would mutter, distracted, her phone glowing in her hand. And I, an agging woman with a stubborn bone and a quiet sorrow, began to see the flicker of irritation in their eyes when I called out for help. One evening, as I struggled to stand, I heard it. Not loudly. Just enough. If she had given us one apartment, we could have hired help. I froze. And in that frozen moment, I finally understood my brother's gift. It was not money. It was not property. It was protection. Protection not just from poverty, but from dependency. From becoming a burden measured in inconvenience and cost. The apartments were my dignity. My shield. My choice. I recovered. Slowly. Painfully. Quietly. When I could walk again without wincing, I called my son and daughter-in-law to the living room. They sat across from me wary. I have made arrangements, I said softly. Sana leaned forward. Arrangements. Yes, one apartment is now legally under lease. The rent will go directly to a separate bank account for my medical needs, my living expenses, and my independence. The other two will remain untouched for now. When I die, they will be divided according to the law, but until then, they are mine. My son's jaw tightened. You don't trust us. Tears filled my eyes. I trust you as my son, I just don't trust life. He looked away. Sana said nothing. So I continued. I raised you with all I had. I fed you before I fed myself. I wore old clothes so you could wear new ones, and I would do it again. But there is one lesson I learned too late, that a woman who owns nothing becomes nothing in the eyes of the world, even in the eyes of the people who love her. Silent. Heavy. Honest. I am not punishing you, I whispered. I am protecting me. Something in Amir's face cracked then, not anger, not greed, just recognition. Maybe even shame. He took my hand. Amir, I'm sorry. Sana's eyes softened. And slowly the fog began to lift. Not fully. Not magically. But enough. Enough to breathe. Enough to remain. Enough to love each other without the weight of unspoken expectations choking the room. Moral of the story. Love is purest when it isn't measured in property, money, or entitlement. And while generosity is a virtue, self-respect and independence are not selfish, they are necessary. Because the world is kinder to those who can stand on their own feet. And sometimes, the greatest gift you can give your children is not your wealth, but the example of how to protect your dignity without losing your heart.